Hey, this is Meredith Elliott Powell. You know what time it is. It is that time of the week where we dive into the strategies, the steps, everything that you need to know to turn all of this uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. Now, I've got an awesome guest for you today. I mean, somebody who's really going to talk about something that we all should have known when we started our careers. In fact, I don't know why they don't teach us this in grade school or at least by high school. Because if you ever want to be successful in today's marketplace, don't wait for somebody else to take the lead. Do it yourself. So in a minute, we're going to dive into the strategies you need to really get more joy and more meaning from the work that you do. And I'm so excited to dive in to this topic. I have a leadership expert, guru, writer, online instructor, Elizabeth Lotardo, also author of the brand new book, Leading Yourself. Welcome to the show. So excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. You are miles ahead with your topic of thriving in an era of uncertainty. So, this is going to be the perfect conversation for leaders right now.
Yeah, it's so funny. When I started writing that book and doing the research, I didn't even see COVID coming. And then I thought COVID would be the biggest thing we'd ever faced. And now COVID almost looks easy compared to the pace of change. But I want to, you cover so much. I mean, I want to start off by just getting a little bit of a background on you. I feel like you have been in the world of online courses long before online courses were cool. And so, kind of walk us through your background, how you got to where you are. And really, I want to understand the premise for this book, because I think this whole idea of leading yourself is relatively unique in the leadership space.
It definitely is. And I'll dovetail these two things together, my journey with online content and leading yourself. So, when I was in high school, you're having conversations with your teachers about what you might want to study in college, what you want to do with your life, as if you can only make that decision once. And I told my teacher that I wanted to double major in education and television. And she said, those two things don't go together.
Interesting.
So,
So you were a real visionary in the era.
I've always been fascinated by the way we can use, TV, film, webinars, the mediums have expanded to teach. And I've always loved teaching in
Mhm.
all forms. And I started my career in advertising, fascinated with human behavior. How can we educate people? How can we inform them? How can we change their behavior? And eventually transitioned into internal communications. I like to say I now use my powers for good, which is how can we make the work experience better? How can we use language and video and tools to create more fulfilling jobs, whether you're a leader, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you're the CEO. And that is ultimately what led me to write my book, Leading Yourself, because I saw in this work in internal communications that so many people were underestimating the amount of power that they had in their seats. So many people were missing opportunities to raise their hand, to find more meaning and more opportunities in their jobs. And so many leaders wanted more for their teammates. They wanted their teammates to feel emotionally fulfilled in this sense of meaning, and they were struggling to provide it. So that's how all of those things came together to form my latest book, Leading Yourself.
I love this topic because I think that it's almost like pervasive in society that we want someone else to do it, right? Like, I build a lot of succession plans in companies, and I've long said you can only create the opportunity for somebody. Whether they walk through that door or not is 100% up to them. Even if you're lucky enough to have the greatest leaders out there, you still have to do some heavy lifting. What is our struggle with leading ourselves? I mean, one thing you said is maybe we don't really understand that we have the power to do it, but are there other pieces with it?
There's a lot of factors that pull us away from self leadership. One you spoke to, we don't see the power we do have because it's easy to zoom in on all the power we don't have. We don't control our boss. Most of us don't control the products our organization makes, the systems that we use, the people that we work with. There's so much out of our control that's really easy to focus on. There's also no shortage of people telling you what to do. You can look anywhere and someone will tell you, I even including this live stream, what you should be doing.
Right.
So there's never a shortage of directions you can take. And lastly, I think what it comes down to is in an era of uncertainty, in an era of rapid change, looking for someone else to tell you is the natural thing to do. We want
Yeah.
to keep ourselves safe. We want to be secure. We don't want it to be our fault if it doesn't work out. And how do we avoid that? We make no decisions and we step out and we wait to be directed, because that is the safest play, we think, in an era of uncertainty. And I love what you dive into in this topic, which is, in an uncertain time, inaction is often the biggest risk,
Yeah.
not immediately, but in the long term. And the same can be said for self leadership. Not leading yourself in the near term, sure, it's not going to cost you that much. You take the directions of other people, you skirt responsibility, it's never your fault. In the long term, it costs you profoundly in the quantifiable success you achieve and in your personal fulfillment.
Yeah, I think that, it's so interesting. Yesterday, I was down speaking to students at High Point University, and we were talking a lot about the fact that there's probably never been a better job market for them to enter, with the silver tsunami happening and all, these people turning 65 for the next. I think we're going to have the biggest wave of people turning 65 for the next 2 or 3 years, and this mass exodus of skills and talents really leading the workforce. But we do have a problem. I think with the crisis of 2008, backed up by COVID, I think we have stopped investing in developing those next level leaders. And that's a lot of fear in the marketplace. People were trying just not to get fired, right? Like, I'll keep my
Yes.
head down. So I'm not going to take a risk. What does somebody do? Like, here, I'm sitting here, I'm 35 years old. I see the retirement waves coming on top of me, and but I'm not skilled to be a next level leader. What do I need to do to start leading myself? And maybe let me back that up in a moment, because I think you did such a good definition here too. What does it mean to lead yourself?
To lead yourself is owning your role. Whatever seat you are in, you are zooming in on what you can control. You are taking charge of that, and you are defining what success looks like. That doesn't mean you don't have performance reviews. That doesn't mean that you stay in this role forever, but it is true ownership of your work experience, how you think about it, how you behave, and how you approach the relationships inside of your job. So let's connect that to, what do you do if you feel like you're not ready for this silver tsunami, you don't have the growth opportunities you want. So there was some interesting research from Glassdoor published last month that reported almost 2 in 3 employees that they surveyed thousands of people across industries, across countries, reported feeling stuck in their
Mhm.
jobs. Like there wasn't a next play inside their organization for them, like they weren't growing, and like they didn't have a lot of opportunities, even if they looked outside of their organization. We've seen the Wall Street Journal reporting how challenging it is for office workers to change roles right now.
Yeah.
So, what do we do in the face of that, knowing that we only control ourselves and our work experience? The first step is to stop waiting for some executive to tap you on the shoulder and be like, I have this perfect growth opportunity for you, oh chosen one. It is
Right.
time to step up. That never happens, or very rarely happens.
Very rarely happens.
Most organizations are moving so quickly, and I'm sure you've seen this in your work with succession planning, that the plan's a little hazy most of the time,
Very,
right? There's
very
not
hazy.
this clear cut defined roadmap. So from your seat, it is on you to raise your hand and express what growth opportunities you would be interested in. That doesn't mean you're demanding them, but making public, at least to your manager, I'm interested in doing more work like this. I'd be
Mhm.
interested in exploring elements of that. You're not necessarily saying, I want to change jobs, I want to get promoted, I want to be the CEO, but what is the next logical step for you to grow in your role? That is on you to identify and to ask for. We often make the mistake of waiting for someone else to identify it and serve it up to us. You
Mhm.
can also look outside of your organization for growth opportunities. If your organization is going a million miles a minute and your manager does not care what webinar you feel like you need to attend to get some skill set, you can still take charge of your development and kind of take a DIY approach. Both of us have tons of resources on LinkedIn Learning and how you can upskill yourself there. There's industry events, there's webinars, there's books you can read. So if you're feeling this level of stuck in your job and you feel like you're not growing and you're stagnant and there's so much going on, don't feel like the growth and development has to happen inside of your job. There are tons of avenues to explore. So you're taking parallel tracks. You're asking for what you need from your organization and saying what a growth opportunity looks like for you and why you want it. You are also growing yourself outside of that seat. You're investing in your learning. You are exploring opportunities widely, and you are making connections that go beyond your department or even your organization.
So if you're such good advice, because I think that I think understanding that you do have control. I've worked, as we all have, in a lot of organizations where you just had a really bad boss.
Yeah.
And you shut down when you have a really bad boss. You're like, well, this environment's horrible. I don't care. But you're basically creating your future the moment you disengage, right? Because while succession plans are incredibly hazy, 70% of companies don't even have one. Every time I've been inside a boardroom, the employee with a great attitude, the employee who's working, the one who's given their all, they always come up in that room. They may never know they come up in that room, but the executives know who's killing it out there. They know who's putting in the extra effort. It's never like, well, you work for a bad boss, so it's okay that you laid down on the job. You just basically got in the pit with them, right?
Yes, you
Yeah.
are paying the price, not them. When you are mad at your boss, when you show up with resentment, when you choose to quiet quit or disengage or emotionally disconnect from your organization's purpose, you are the one paying the price, not your employer. You are the one who is not going to get chosen for opportunities. You are the one who is going to feel bad every day, and you are the one who is going to lose the momentum in your career. And if you let a bad boss cost you that, that's on you.
Can you work around a bad boss?
Yes and no, right? I don't want to make the suggestion that all bosses are workable. Some bosses are toxic and terrible, and you're better off putting your effort into finding a new job. Having said that, the subtitle of my book is Despite Imperfect
Right.
Bosses.
I loved that you said imperfect bosses, weird economies, lethargic coworkers, annoying systems, and too many deliverables. That is work for so many people today.
That
It's a
is what
great
the
it's a great
research tells
subtitle.
us keeps
Yeah.
us awake at night when
Yeah.
it comes to workplace satisfaction. But the vast majority of bosses are imperfect, right? They're not showing up trying to make you feel bad and make you feel like you don't have any opportunities and that you're dumb. They have some annoying tendencies, be it a tendency to micromanage, to change their mind a lot, to lose your email. All of those minor grievances are workable in how you lead up, whether that's defining a check-in cadence with your manager, whether that's reminding them of what they said previously. Just that little extra effort can make an imperfect boss less challenging on a day-to-day basis.
What about if I'm a leader and, because I think this book is so great for leaders too, that you're sitting there and you're thinking, because I think when I first started studying employee engagement and all the things that were being done to engage employees, I thought, what is wrong with this system is we're acting like it's a company's responsibility to engage the employee. And it isn't. It's
100%.
it's your it's your responsibility to create an environment, but you can't make everybody engage. What are some of your strategies and ideas that leaders can create an environment where people feel they can lead themselves? And one of the reasons I ask the question is because I often see with leaders when they have an unbelievable environment, a real environment of empowerment, they struggle with those leaders that come in who don't take advantage of that. And
Mhm.
I think what we have to understand about employees is that they come in still with the mindset or the culture of the place they last worked. And you have to kind of create that type of environment.
So, there are a couple of key pillars that go into creating an environment in which an employee can be engaged. And I am in complete agreement with you. We talk about employee engagement like it's some abstraction, like this weird thing we have to do to a group of people who have no free will, right? That's
Right.
not how it plays out. We create an organizational culture in which it is possible for engaged people to stay engaged. It is the
Mhm.
responsibility of the individual. But how do you create a culture that fosters that, or at least doesn't erode it too rapidly?
Yeah.
The first step is to connect the work to the purpose of the organization. when you sync up everyone on that purpose, you start getting more creativity, you start getting more innovation, you start getting more empowerment, right? There's something we're going for together beyond our own departmental metrics, beyond this quarter's roadmap. So calibrating to that shared purpose is going to give you the energy and creative thinking from your team. That's the first step as a leader. The second step, empower them to make decisions, which is often the most challenging one for a leader, right? Because not all of those decisions are going to be awesome. Some of
Right.
them are going to be wrong, and some of them are going to be expensive. But when a leader plays the long game in terms of empowerment from their teams, they get so much more than they would have if they saved that little quick error or if they had their
Yeah.
fingers inside of every decision. The speed you gain, the empowerment you gain, the recruiting advantage you gain, and the innovation that comes from that is well worth the trade-off of a few wrong plays. So I think calibrating to that shared vision and then letting people do it, provided you've given them the tools and the skills and the resources and the support, that is the secret to creating a highly engaged and highly empowered culture.
Yeah. I think that, I think one of the most difficult things for leaders is getting comfortable with allowing failure. And you really cannot learn without failure. I was talking with a student yesterday who said, she asked me the question about perfectionism. And I said, luckily for me, I don't suffer from probably too much to the extreme the other way, but I don't like to fail. And I remember back when I used to loan money that I had credit authority, and my boss told me, he said, "You'll never understand how to loan money until a loan goes bad." I was scared to death of a loan going bad. But when one did, he was right. But he allowed me to make a bad loan, like to literally cost the company money. But he understood the power that I would learn so much more from that, and I would become such a better lender. And I think in the we're highly competitive, rising inflation, interest rates, squeeze on margins. I think we've lost that comfort level with allowing people to make a mistake and people feeling okay with failure.
I agree with you. And I'll speak directly to middle management here, which is, oh, that sounds great. Let people fail intellectually. Awesome. I have a balance sheet and a scorecard, and
Right.
my boss is going to ream me out if one of my people fail. So we're stuck in this tricky dance of intellectually we know freedom to fail is an important pillar of engagement. Practically, we know our organization has no tolerance for that and we can't change it.
Mhm.
So, as a middle manager, the onus is on you to identify opportunities for your employees to fail within the guardrails that you have. Whether that's pitching an idea to a team meeting and you know the idea is not going to go maybe that
Right.
great, whether it's going forward to a client with something that could be better but isn't that bad, you know your organization's risk tolerance and whatever guardrails you need to operate in, even if it's one of we can never afford to lose a single dollar, no mistakes at all, identify an opportunity for them to peer coach someone, for them to mock pitch you an idea. Whatever it is that says, "Hey, I believe in you and you can do this." Even if it's not making a bad loan, they will get the MO that they are empowered and that they are a driver inside of this organization of decisions, not just, checking off the to-do list that has been handed to them from the almighty C-suite.
What if you're in an organization and you read your book and you're taking some of these strategies and it's just not an organization that's honoring somebody who's leading themselves? Do you keep going? Do you keep, trying to lead yourself? What do you do in that respect?
Everyone has different logistical constraints here. So I think it's important to recognize that I can't sit up here on this live stream on this podcast and say you should quit your job, right? We
Right.
all have bills to pay, we have families to support. What I will say is pay attention to your own energy. You can embody all the elements of self-leadership and make marginal improvements in your job, but if you are continuously fighting uphill, that is something to be aware of energetically because again we're playing the long game with ourselves. Energetically you want to stay in that space of purpose driven, of empowered, of an agent of change inside of your organization. Having said that, no organization is perfect, and I think the temptation is to, oh, I tried to lead myself for 3 weeks and no one noticed and gave me
Yeah.
a promotion and now I'm leaving. We have some interesting data. I don't know if you've seen the LinkedIn trending topics around this revenge quitting
You're right.
trend that is going to come in predicted February, March of 2025. Everyone's New Year's resolution is to get a new job. It makes me think of the data we have from the Great Resignation
Yeah.
only a few years ago, where we saw this massive degree like we had never seen before of employee turnover. And what the data tells us is that the vast majority of employees, something like 62%, reported they felt they left their organization too quickly. And
Hmm.
over half of them said they were better off at their previous job.
Yeah.
Because going back to the subtitle of this book, imperfect bosses, annoying systems, too much to do, coworkers who aren't your best friends, those things are ever present. So while it may be valid to say, I'm going to find a new job because, I've made a real effort to lead myself and I keep getting, stepped on, that could be true. But again, no organization is perfect, and you're going to bump up against some friction leading yourself inside of every single organization you work for.
I found that so those statistics around the Great Resignation, I mean, I think it was, I forget, it was like 47 million people resigned, and within 2 years, 2 or 3 out of 5 were already looking for another opportunity
Yeah.
because they just ran into the same problems, they ran into the same challenges, and it wasn't really the job, it was their ability to really navigate. I always tell my clients, I say, you're lucky in your life if you work for two good bosses, two
Yeah.
people that you would really jump off a cliff for. You're lucky. You may go through your entire career and never work directly for somebody that, but that's sort of the premise of the book is figure out then how to lead yourself through it so you could be happy and you could be successful anywhere. One of the things I thought when I was reading the book, are you ever too old or too far in your career for a book like this about leading yourself? And the reason I asked that question is because, when I got out of corporate America, there seems to be a tipping point. You either stay in or you stay out. And then, you all find yourselves like 2.5 children and a mortgage. And no matter what you're doing, you're stuck. You can't move. I don't care how much you hate your boss, how much you hate anything. The bills creep at the door and you can't make the shifts. Are you ever too old to start leading yourself and taking ownership of what you're doing?
My gut reaction is no. And I'll tell you a funny story. I wrote in the book that this is a book for normal people inside of normal jobs and that it is not for the C suite, that every leadership book under the sun is for the C suite. And I didn't want to be part of that. I wanted
Yeah.
to write for normal people. And I got all these emails from C suite leaders saying, I loved your book. And I was like, I told you to stop reading in the introduction. What do you mean? But what I think that speaks to is no matter what seat you are in, even if you're the CEO, you don't control everything. You have
Yeah.
a board to report to, you have shareholders who are going to do whatever they want, you have an unpredictable economy, you have an incredibly quick rate of change, especially when it comes to new technology. In the way you navigate yourself inside of those turbulent waters is your biggest predictor of success, whether you are an entry level analyst or whether you are the CEO. The ability to zoom in on what you can control and operate in imperfect conditions is the hallmark of a high performer, no matter what level you are right now.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was reading the book, the biggest question I got asked yesterday at High Point University was from the students was, what do we need to do to differentiate ourselves in the marketplace? And I was really thinking what you need to do is lead yourself. I was wondering too. I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I spoke behind this futurist at a speaking engagement in Baltimore, Maryland. I thought most of what he said was bunk, but but he did say this. He said that white collar workers, CPAs, attorneys, things like that, we're going to see a lot of fractional. He did a video of guys standing on the corner, construction workers, and the truck comes by and picks them up. And he had all these guys getting in ties, women getting in suits, because he said the white collar worker is going to become fractional, and that has become very valid. There's quite a bit of fractional work around that. And then the other thing he said is while people are people and there aren't many differences between the generations, there are always good employees and weak employees. He said one of the major differences is that anybody who is of a baby boomer age was raised in a family where their mother put them out of the house, locked the door, and told them to come back at 6 o'clock at night for dinner. And from that, kids had to learn to build teams together. They had to learn rejection. They had to learn problem solving and critical thinking skills. And today, kids are pretty much managed from the time they wake up. They're like professional football players, right? They don't make a decision for themselves. Somebody tells them what to do. And he said there's going to need to be a lot more of helping people learn to critically think, stand on their own, and take a risk. And I just wondered, when you were doing the research for the book and writing it, if you found any more need in this environment to tell people to lead themselves.
I certainly agree with the sentiment of those remarks, but I do think it's worth noting that even Socrates is like, the young people
Yeah,
today are so
exactly, right?
entitled. You know,
Right.
this is not a new phenomenon today.
Not at all. We always think the generation coming behind us is worthless.
Having said that, I do think there is merit to the notion that decision making and personal autonomy has taken a backseat.
Mhm.
And we have never before had as many resources. We have never before been as tightly scheduled as we are now. We have never before been as acutely aware of the rate of change, right? Our
Mhm.
brain is literally unable to process the amount of information that's going on a global scale right now. We're made to know the information of like 30 people in our tribes. It's breaking everybody.
Right.
So when we think about that as it relates to new generation coming into the workplace, I do think there is an increasing need to empower that generation and say you have to lead yourself. And some of that, let me know if this lands with you. I think is perpetuated by the employee experience has never been front and center like it is right
Yes.
now. There's all this talk about how a manager needs to be someone who champions your growth, needs to have these elaborate one-on-ones with you, how HR needs to have a learning path designed for you, how it's on the employer to create this amazing experience. So this new generation is going into the workforce with really high
Yeah.
expectations, and that's not necessarily wrong. But when they bump up against friction, we see some immediate turnover in some of those 4 or 5 month in resignations. And to
Yeah.
me, that's a unique challenge of today.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. I always think, I feel like today's employers are almost really great big enablers. They're giving all these things away and they're having an expectation of return, and they have not given any clarity to what the expectation of return. I think about it. I think, my dad and his company, he'd have never brought in a masseuse for half a day, like, because we were going through a conversion or something that, that never would have happened. So there's a lot of great things that highlight the experience. But I think one difference, when I was growing up, you pretty much, if you asked your parents something, they would pretty much say figure it out. Or if you went to go do a football team, I think one of the things that's so great about the book is it gives people permission to lead themselves. And that may sound silly, but I don't know that everybody really understands, like you said, that they have the power to do that.
Absolutely. And again, it doesn't mean you're going to change every asset of frustration in your work experience, but zooming in on, hey, how can I make the one on ones with my leader better? What
Right.
topics can I bring up where this is more fulfilling to me? How can I deeply connect to the meaning of my work? How can I connect to my organization's purpose, taking ownership of that? How can I raise my hand for growth opportunities, become that need to know person inside of my organization? It sounds simple intellectually, but it is challenging to execute on a daily basis. And back to, there's no shortage of direction. There's always going to be more to do than you can ever get done. The temptation is to shy away from making those decisions.
Right. Right. Well, you have been just amazing. I always like to end with two questions, and you can answer them in any order. For the audience listening to this, who's sitting out there struggling with their career, struggling with all of the uncertainty in today's marketplace, and 2025 is shaping up to be a very uncertain year, what is your one piece of advice for them? If you want to leave them with one thought, what would that be? And then, of course, tell people how to get a hold of you, how to get a hold of leading yourself, and how all the amazing courses that you do on the LinkedIn Learning channel. Really great stuff.
So, my one piece of advice would be remember that you're never powerless. In the face of organizational restructures, in the face of a challenging economy, in the face of worrying, is AI going to take my job? It's tempting to feel like the world is swirling. But no
Mhm.
matter your seat, you have the power to change that. If you want to learn more about me or my book, you can check me out at elizabethlotardo.com or on LinkedIn. Like Meredith, I have a library of LinkedIn learning courses. My book is available basically everywhere you buy books, Amazon, Target, Barnes Noble, all those cool spots. And I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And anyone who is landing with this notion of my work's not perfect right now, but I think it can be a little bit better, give me a follow.
I love that. I tell you, I just wrote that down. You're never powerless. What an incredibly important message personally and professionally. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, audience, for being there. And remember, join us every Monday, 1 o'clock, for another episode of Thrive, the show where we dive into the strategies, discuss the steps, everything that you need to know to turn uncertainty into your greatest competitive advantage. We'll see you next week.